Well, it's a little-known story out of Florida, but it's really interesting. It turns out administrators with the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office have done something unprecedented. They're taking measures to try to give patients at hospitals and doctors' offices to give up their constitutional right to privacy by having doctors slip in a form. I mean, you know how it goes. You go to the doctor's office, and especially if it's a new doctor, there is a mountain of paperwork. A lot of it is simple stuff: your name, your date of birth, social security number, how many drinks you have a week. And then there's often a list of questions about your medical history, your family's medical history. But then, by the time you get to page 7 or page 8, you just want to see the doctor. So you fill out the forms as fast as you can, and you read and you sign. But apparently, this page that was reportedly added to a pile of paperwork for many Florida patients said this. It said, the undersigned knowingly and voluntarily agrees to the release of any and all protected health information for any and all purposes, regardless of whether any particular purpose is mentioned, including but not limited to all prescriptions, including drug dosage and quantity, all notes regarding past, present, and future treatment or examination, any record or document considered a medical record under Florida or federal law. Now, most of you should be familiar with the federal medical privacy law called HIPAA. This form, I've got it right here, this form makes HIPAA null and void. Administrators were hoping it would help them fight a rampant prescription drug epidemic by finding out which patients are getting prescribed which drugs. Mike Riggs is an associate editor for Reason magazine, and he's here to talk more about this. And I should mention, Mike, so far, this story came out, but no doctors have turned in these signed forms. But what is the bigger picture here?
The bigger picture here is that a year ago, the Office of National Drug Control Policy under President Obama released a strategy for combating the prescription drug epidemic. One of their goals, and they didn't spell it out to the extent that we're seeing in Sarasota, but one of their goals was to find ways for state and local law enforcement to get around what the administration called legislative and legal barriers to investigation. One of these things are state laws, local laws, and also federal laws that protect patient privacy. So I don't think that there's any push from Washington, but I think it did send the message to local law enforcement agencies: go ahead and figure out what you can do to sort of speed up the process of an investigation. If you get the sense that a local pharmacy is selling too many or filling too many prescriptions for hydrocodone or oxycodone, it could take a while to get a subpoena, it could take a while to get a warrant. So they asked doctors, fill out these forms that give these forms to your patients, basically signing away all their medical records, so that a police officer could then come to a doctor and say, for any patient who signed this form, we would like their records. But obviously doctors are saying no. They're saying no because they think it violates patient privacy, but this also exposes doctors in a big way, because then they're also going to be telling law enforcement what they've been doing in terms of medical treatment.
And, I should say there's actually not a lot, but some support for what the sheriff's office is doing, because what they say they're doing is they're trying to deal with, I guess last year there were more than 100 overdose deaths in Sarasota and Manatee counties in Florida. So what they're trying to do is find out more about these patients who could possibly be breaking the law, doing what's called doctor shopping, getting multiple doctors to give them multiple prescriptions. Talk a little bit about this, the fact that a lot of people are saying, hey, we think that this is a good thing that the sheriffs are doing that.
Right. I mean, there are a lot of drug warriors and supporters of strict drug policy who think it's a good idea to do this. And I don't ever want to give the impression that I think that it's not a big deal that people are dying of overdose, or that you have people driving under the influence of oxycodone and this kind of stuff. But the full push, if you look at the big picture, you have the DEA shutting down pharmacies. You have the federal government saying that doctors who prescribe more than 20 pain medications a day, and if you look at Sarasota County, it's got a lot of old people, a lot of slip and fall accidents.
That's a really good point.
And, medical marijuana, which can also be used to treat chronic pain, is illegal in Florida and the majority of the United States. So if you're looking at what can you prescribe to someone who's got a broken hip or just had knee replacement surgery, you're looking really at only heavy-duty pharmaceuticals such as hydrocodone and oxycodone and these kinds of things. So this push has done two things. One, it has made doctors terrified for their profession. It is killing businesses by shutting down pharmacies, and it is preventing access to pain medication. And I think when you look at this push, like this is obviously the least bad thing, this form, in the sense that it's, you know, there is something very spurious about the fact that it doesn't say that it's for law enforcement purposes.
Right. It doesn't, and I think law enforcement even had a hand in sort of drawing it up.
Yeah, they did. I mean, they wrote these and then they handed them to doctors. This is probably the least bad thing we've seen in terms of the DEA coming in and shutting down our pharmacies. And there are towns in Florida and all throughout the southern United States that don't have more than one pharmacy or two pharmacies. So if the DEA comes in and shuts down an entire CVS pharmacy, you know, I mean, you're looking at an entire town saying that they can't get prescriptions filled for anything.
So you're saying a lot of people who are not abusing the system end up getting punished.
And we know that it's a small number of people who are abusing the system in terms of what they're doing with doctors and what they're doing with pharmacies. The number of people who may be abusing the drugs themselves is larger, obviously, than the people who are sort of working the system. But if you have 100 overdose deaths in Sarasota County, that doesn't mean 100 people were doctor shopping. It could mean 5 people were doctor shopping.
Right.
But it could end up exposing hundreds or thousands of innocent patients to totally unwarranted, you know, government surveillance of their medical records, which means, and you know, I don't, and there's this idea, if you're not doing anything wrong, what do you have to hide? Well, it's not their business, you know, and if I'm seeking therapy what if I'm seeking treatment for drug abuse? Right. Or, you know, what if, I just don't, the government doesn't need to know, which is why we have HIPAA. And again, this is a small number of people, and one of the doctors mentioned, interviewed by the Herald Tribune in Sarasota, said that he makes patients sign a form that if they try to doctor shop with him, he can turn them in.
Right.
That doesn't mean he's giving away their records.
Because he doesn't want to lose his practice.
Yeah, and I think,
again,
you know, we should be encouraging healthy doctor-patient relationships, not basically saying that doctors don't know well enough and that the law enforcement agency should be able to come in and police that relationship.
So again, you know, I did print out this form, and if you take a look, I mean, you guys probably can't see it, but the font size here is very small, and it's, you know, after you filled out all those other forms, it's a whole lot to go through and read. But the bottom line is, Mike, shouldn't the responsibility come down to the patient itself? Shouldn't you read before you sign?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And the thing is, I think patients in Sarasota County, this is getting a lot of play down there, as most, you know, prescription pill stories do in Florida. They know more now. They know better. At the same time, if I want to know. I want to know if my doctor is colluding with a law enforcement agency. You know, the story reported that most of these doctors aren't, and not a single one has turned in a form.
We already have to worry about doctors colluding with prescription drug companies and getting kickbacks.
I have to worry about my telecom company, you know, colluding with the government, giving over my records. Like, I just want to know. I want to know. Yeah. So yes, there's due diligence on the part of the patient, always. In all contractual disputes, there's due diligence on the part of the signer. But I also want to know.
You know, it's really interesting because this article, as you said, has gotten a lot of play in Florida. It's also sort of bringing up questions about privacy rights of patients. Some doctors have said, you know, they want to call authorities or whomever the appropriate places to say, hey, I'm concerned that my patient is in fact doctor shopping, but I, as a doctor, can't do that because it goes against privacy rights.
Against HIPAA, absolutely, which is why I think there was a great example of a doctor saying, you know, doctors who treat a lot of people for pain, I think maybe they should have the option, you know, to say to the patient, if you want to seek treatment here, you know, these are the rules for seeking treatment at this practice.
Right.
And one of them is, if I prescribe you, you know, an oxycodone prescription a month's worth on the 1st of the month, and you come in on the 5th and say you need another one, you know, we're going to sit down and have a discussion about terminating your treatment or possibly, you know, getting the government involved. But again, that's, you know, I think these particulars can be worked out between doctors and patients. I don't think doctors should relinquish that sort of authority to, I mean, you know, there are enough doctors out there who don't know what they're talking about, unfortunately. I don't want a law enforcement officer who has no medical training involved in determining whether or not I'm getting the best possible medical treatment.
All right, certainly an interesting discussion and just an interesting story overall. Associate Editor for Reason, Mike Riggs, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.